Hey everyone, Brian here. I hope you're all well and welcome to the Mental Musician Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And right off the bat, I just want to say Happy New Year 2026. We are halfway through the 2020s. Unbelievable how quickly time flies, or how time feels like it's flying. But I want to wish you all well for this year. If 2025 wasn't a great year for you, then I hope this year is a better year for you. And, if 2025 was a good year for you, I hope that luck and joy, happiness continues for you. If you're tuning in for the first time, thank you so much and welcome. I'm so glad that you've picked my podcast out of all the thousands of podcasts out there on the internet. And if you're tuning in after listening to the first episode, thank you so much for coming back. I hope that first episode, my interview with Mike Wright, wonderful bass guitarist and teacher from the UK, gave you something. Maybe it gave you a little bit of hope, bit of reassurance, and maybe it helped you realize that you're not alone in your own struggles. And that's what I want this podcast to be about, whether it's through these solo episodes like what today's going to be like, or if I bring on people where they share their own journeys, their struggles. It's all about being honest, being vulnerable, and opening up about the real mental health and mental illness struggles that a lot of artists, musicians, and creators will face throughout their careers, but traditionally don't talk about because of the stigma that's not just in the music industry, but all around the world. So I hope to continue that, and hopefully today's episode is going to give you something as well. And if you did enjoy my chat with Mike and this episode as well, I'd love if you could share it around with all your friends, your family, especially if you know someone who's struggling and having a tough time. They don't necessarily have to be a musician. They could just be someone you know in your inner circle. And that's what I hope this podcast to be about. The one thing I've told people is that I'm not a clinician, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist. So I'm not here to give stats and all these science-based advice and lessons. I'm just talking about the personal experiences I've had. And hopefully that tells you that I am an everyday person and a real life example of someone who's struggled with severe depression, anxiety. I've had suicidal thoughts, but I've found a way to get through and manage them. And I'm still fighting on to live on for another day. And hopefully that gives you a little bit of hope as well. So I'm going to say hope a lot, but that is really the main theme of this podcast. So I really appreciate it if you shared it around. And the more people listen to this, the more I know that mental health awareness is going to get stronger, not just for the music industry, but the world as a whole. So today is going to be a solo episode. It's just me today, and I'm going to mix up the format like that. So every now and then it's going to be just me, where I'll share some stories, some experiences, maybe some lessons as well. And other times I'll bring on some guests where we have some chats, just like the first episode that I had with Mike. Speaking of the new year, today's episode is going to be somewhat of a reflective episode where I want to share some of the things I learned in 2025 and share some of the changes I made in terms of how I managed my depression and mental health as a whole. A lot of these changes that I made were somewhat forced. Actually, they were quite forced now that I think of it, given that at the end of 2024, I had 2 seizures and my body and mind completely shut down. So I fell into the darkest and deepest period of depression that I've had in my life. I've struggled with depression for 10 years, and up until last year, I'd found ways to get through the best I can. But after those 2 seizures at the end of 2024, I felt like it was going to be very difficult and maybe even close to impossible to get back. So 2025 was this rebuilding year where I really had to take a good hard look at myself and realize just how important it was to take care of myself and, to stop pushing myself to the brink, to stop putting my music, my career, my work ahead of my friends and family and my health as well. Those seizures came about after a prolonged period of about 4 years where all I cared about was work, and I placed my value as a person on the work I did. So whether it was teaching guitar to my students, the gigs I was doing, I was studying music as well at the time. And all I did was focus on that. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. I definitely wasn't spending time with family and friends. And I absolutely was not taking care of myself. I guess, I use the excuse of, oh, I'm young, I'm 25 or 26 years old. I'll be fine. I'm healthy and, I'll get through. But even so, at the end of 2024, I had pushed myself so much, so far, that even my mind and body went, well, if you're not going to take care of yourself, we are going to do that for you. And that's when my body just completely shut down. And that's when I hit my rock bottom. And throughout my 20s, I tried so hard to ignore anything resembling long-term mental health treatment, from therapy, CBT, medication, group sessions, even just having honest conversations with my family and friends. I told myself and I convinced myself that my music career and my guitar would be enough. And honestly, there are days that I feel like I've forgotten what it's like to be a musician. I've become so trapped in the bubble of being a musician that I don't even know why I was putting so much value and emphasis on my music career. That's something I'd like to ask you. Have you felt that way? Have you ever felt that when life outside of your music becomes so chaotic that it drowns the music itself? That's something I felt. Things outside my life and my personal life were so chaotic, and I relied on music to give me that sense of control, that sense of calm. But unfortunately, by the end of 2024, 2025, music no longer gave me that calm and solace, and the music itself became chaotic. And unfortunately, I had nothing after that or behind that to give me that calm. So, as I mentioned earlier, most of 2025 was all about rebuilding my life, not just my music career. I had to start again, if you will. And I know a lot of musicians that I know personally are trying to do the same thing, and they've tried to work on finding ways to take care of their health whilst being able to pursue their dreams, which is something that musicians and artists are hardly taught, if ever taught. You're either taught to put your art and craft ahead of everything and everyone else, or just don't do it at all. So I get the challenge, I get the dichotomy and the irony of both. After my breakdown, I genuinely didn't want that dream anymore. I didn't want to touch the guitar. I didn't want to teach. I didn't even listen to a lot of music. I wanted to move on and do something else. I wanted to try to build meaning away from music. I wanted to give my life value and not have music be put on this pedestal. And that's where I started focusing on mental health advocacy, particularly for musicians and artists, but also just talking about mental health as a whole in society. So I did that in 2025, built my newsletter, started making YouTube videos where I talk about things like this, and also talking to fellow friends, fellow musicians, and doing my best to open up, to be vulnerable, and be willing to share the experiences that I had, the times that I've been completely lost, completely hopeless, thought about taking my life as well, and having honest conversations without thinking that they may lead to solutions. And I think that was very important for me, where previously, throughout the early part of 2020, I never talked about it. I hid behind my music. All I did was just play a song, and if someone asked me if I was doing okay or if I'm struggling, I'd just say, yeah, it's all right. I'll teach, I'll do some gigs, things will be fine. Really inside, I was screaming, and I really wanted to say, I'm fucked. I'm I'm not doing well at the moment. I'm really struggling. I don't want to look at a piece of music. I don't want to listen to a song. I didn't even want to touch my guitar. I just want to let go of the shame and the guilt and be able to say that I'm not doing okay and I think I need help. So a lot of 2025 was learning how to take care of myself, how to manage my mental and physical health whenever the black dog of depression shows its teeth. Because of that, I want to share these things with you. Some of the things that I've learnt and some of the things that I have tried to change in my life and will continue trying to do so in 2026. Now, the key word is try, because I'll be honest, I've been trying on and off for decades. Maybe I haven't been trying consistently enough, but I've definitely been trying so hard to take care of myself. It's just that anytime I get to a point where I feel like I'm getting on top of my health, I remind myself that no, music has to come first and I have to quote unquote struggle. I have to be that tortured artist. Now that I say it out loud, it's just ridiculous. Like, no dream, no career is worth sacrificing your health for. I've failed plenty of times over the last 10 years, and each time I've failed and fallen apart, I genuinely want to give up. Trying to get back up has just been exhausting. But it also has been the one thing that has kept me alive. It is the one thing that I can control, and it's the one thing that you can control. If you think about being a musician, our careers, your career is not entirely based, but it's very heavily based on whether or not people listen to your music, whether people are willing to turn up to your shows, buy your music, hire you. Whereas your health, taking care of yourself, is something that you can pretty much control 100%. As I said earlier, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a clinician, I'm not a mental health scholar. I'm just someone who has lived with depression and anxiety for over a decade and battled bouts of suicidal ideation. I'm someone who's found a way to still stay alive, and whilst I still go through bouts of depression and fall back into that dark place every now and then, I'm still here. And hopefully me sharing some of these solutions with you give you some ideas on how you can twist and adjust them for your life and life situation. The one thing I will say is that these things that I've implemented in my life have been very specific to my situation. So I'm not saying you have to copy what I do. I'm saying take these lessons and adjust them for your situation, your lifestyle, and what's going on in your life. I just hope that they give you some ideas. And, of course, if you feel like the solutions and things that I've done are exactly what you need, go for it. But everyone's slightly different. And that's the challenge with mental health or any mental illness. There's no one solution for two different people. You have to be witty and you have to be willing to just adjust things and look at things in a different way every now and then. And the more you keep trying, eventually you'll find something that works for you today. It may not work tomorrow, but trying to find something that works for today is absolutely worth it. At least it was worth it for me. So I want to share a few things with you that I've changed in my life that have been monumental, not just for my music career, but my mental health and my life as a whole. Here we go. All right, number one, sending a message to a friend just to check in. So at least once a week in 2025, I started messaging a friend or family member, particularly one who I hadn't seen in a while, and I would send them a text that goes something like this. Hey man, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to check in with you, see how you're going. I hope everything is okay with you. I'd love to catch up with you soon. See you soon. Now, when I started doing this with some of my closest guy friends, I would get the typical man response. So often I'd get a text that says, "What's wrong?" As if to say, Why are you dropping your guts to me? That's weird. Men don't show their emotion. And that's the exact thing that I wanted to break with this. Because up until this point, I had never been vulnerable, really. I never properly opened up. I would hide behind my music. The only time I would be vulnerable is to play a very emotional ballad on my guitar and tell a story before playing that song on the guitar. And, every now and then people would ask, oh, that's such a beautiful song. It shows your pain and all your painful experiences. But I was still hiding behind my music. So I know I said earlier that these things that I'm sharing with you are about helping you and trying to find ways to manage your mental health. But the other benefit of doing this is that this helped me reconnect with my friends, my closest mates, and really get deep with them and realize that there are people in my life who I love dearly and friends and people in my life who love me as well. The amazing thing is that once I started checking in with some of my mates, they would start opening up to me after we get through the typical man response and, where we say, yeah, we're fine. Don't worry about me, mate. I would probe and probe and probe until my mates would say, actually, I'm not doing okay. It's incredible how almost every time I did this, the conversation would lead to us opening up to each other. We'd talk about what was giving us a tough time, the stresses we had in our lives, whether it was with our relationships, our jobs, or just having low self-confidence, like we didn't believe in ourselves, and whether or not some of us were thinking about going to therapy. I'll give you an example of this. Back in October, I checked in with my best friend who I've known ever since we were 10 years old. I'd sent him a text like that, and straight away he sent me a reply that said, "Thanks, mate. I really needed this. Thank you for checking in." And it's amazing how throughout our friendship, we have never really opened up in this vulnerable way, but me reaching out to him regularly last year helped him, and he would leave some details out and he kept his responses short, but our conversations then would start leading to him talking about how he's having a tough time. He's a primary school teacher, so as you know, primary school teachers, particularly in the public school system, it's a thankless job. It's incredibly stressful. He'd talk about how he was tired all the time, exhausted, like he felt like he wasn't doing a good job, and every time he did something right, he did something wrong. And him opening up to me like that helped me open up to him about my struggles. I started talking to him about my suicidal ideation. He was one of the first few people in my inner circle to know that. And we never really led to any conversation about finding solutions or outcomes or ways to deal with it. We just chatted like two mates, two brothers. At the end of the conversation, we would end it by saying, "Thanks, mate. Love you. I'll see you soon." And we'll send each other a little bit of a heart emoji. It showed me that we're not afraid to give each other a bit of bromance, a bit of man love. And it was really important for me to start doing this because, one, I felt like I was helping out my mates and my friends, but it also reminded me that there are people in my life that love me and would look out for me. My best friend, his family, my girlfriend, her family, and some of my other very close friends. When I had those 2 seizures at the end of 2024, they were all willing to just drop everything they were doing. And the moment that they heard that I was in hospital, they texted me, called me and said, "Do you need anything?" And up until that point, I could use logic and rationalize and say, yeah, I know you guys love me. But I would always tell myself that I wasn't worth loving. I was unworthy of being loved. And if I died that day, everyone would move on with their life. But after I had those 2 seizures, to see that everyone around me were there for me, it just reminded me that there are people in my life who love me. So I started doing this, sending messages to friends, close friends, just checking in with them. And I'll tell you what, when we eventually catch up in person, we open up even more. The conversations we have stay within the two of us. And at the end of our lunch, dinner, or catch up, we give each other a big bro hug. We say we're not afraid to say I love you. We're not afraid to be vulnerable, maybe cry a little bit as well. And we continue catching up later on. All right, number 2, journaling, but not the way it's usually done. So most musicians I know journal purely about their music. They'll write about their practice routines, their songs, their gigs, their dreams, what they want to achieve, how they feel about the songs that they're writing, their technique, and all that stuff. And whilst this is important, it barely scratches the surface, and what you end up doing is just hiding your real struggles behind your music. That's something that I did for a very, very long time. Whilst it's important to, plan a vision and build a dream and journal about your career and aspirations, it does nothing for your personal life. It does nothing really for your mental health. And as I mentioned earlier, you just end up ignoring the other struggles that you're having that need to be addressed just as much, if not more, than your music. So when I started journaling, which was about 8 years ago, so I've been doing it on and off for nearly a decade, I would just write the typical Dear Diary, this is what happened today. This is what I felt in this moment. I felt angry, sad, frustrated, pissed off. And I know that works for some people, but that didn't really work for me because I felt like I was just recounting the day more than anything. And I didn't get anything out of doing that. And that's why I ignored journaling for a long time. So after the 2 seizures I had, I remember talking to a mate of mine who also struggles with deep depression. He's struggled for a long time. And he told me that he felt like he was just existing, like he was watching his life unfold right in front of his eyes and watching a version of him deteriorate in front of him. And he described almost exactly what I was feeling about my life. So after he told me this was back in September last year, I thought, why don't I give journaling another crack? Let me see if I could write in this way and just try something, because at this point I was willing to try anything. I was scraping the bottom of the barrel and I just wanted something to give myself any mental clarity and mental freedom. So let me pull out my journal and I'll read an excerpt of what I wrote that night. I feel like I'm just a walking shadow, and the further I walk, eventually the sun will stop shining on it and I'll just fade away. But if I can just keep walking, as heavy as my legs feel, I'll walk into the sunlight and my shadow will reappear again. So you don't have to get all poetic like this. I just wanted to write in this way, just have a little bit more, fun with it, because journaling for me is not fun. I try to be as honest as possible and I leave my deepest and darkest, most vulnerable thoughts in my journal. And that's what a journal's meant to be. But what this helped me do was it helped give me more clarity on my life. And I realized that when I have mates of mine who are struggling, I'd be so willing to jump in and give them some advice and say something that helps take a bit of weight and pressure off them. I wouldn't do that for myself though. And I know that a lot of people who struggle with depression, people in my personal life are like this, but a lot of people out in the world, those who struggle with depression or any mental illness are more willing to be empathetic with others than themselves. So by writing this way, it helped me be a little less judgmental towards myself. So after my mate gave me this idea, every time I journal, or I try to do this every time I journal, I don't do this every time, at the end of each entry, I would try to write something positive or optimistic that would just give me a little bit of hope for tomorrow. So even if I was having the most shit day, I felt so terrible about myself, I would remind myself that either I still made it through to the end of the day, or that there were some things that I managed to achieve, or that it's okay. It's okay to have a bad day. It's okay to not be okay. I know a lot of that sounds cliche, but honestly, these cliches work, and it hasn't made things necessarily more positive or lighter, but it's just given me a little bit more. It's taken the pressure off me so that I'm not trying so hard to fight. I forgive myself if I don't have a good day. I forgive myself if I make a few more mistakes, and I realize that, hey, I have a chance to try again tomorrow. So see if you can try this. Like I said, you don't have to get all poetic and creative about the way you write it. If you want to, then go for it. It can make things a little bit more interesting, and you turn yourself into a pretty cool movie or book character. So that's number 2. And number 3, and this is arguably the most important change that I made, this is embracing therapy as part of my routine. I've been in and out of therapy for the best part of 8 years, and I've definitely cancelled more sessions than I intended. And more often than not, it wasn't the session itself, it wasn't therapy itself that I resisted, but it was everything leading up to therapy. It'd be booking the time, getting out of bed, sitting in the waiting room that smelled like recycled hospital air, on carpet that looked older than the building, older than the suburb itself, surrounded by all these other people who were in similar situations to me. So that really would intimidate me. It was the effort of having to bring myself to go to this and be willing to open up and spill my guts and talk to a complete stranger. There was also the shame and guilt surrounding therapy, and it was more within myself because I felt like I could handle things on my own. And if I needed therapy or medication or any other external means, and then I let myself down, then I failed. But I started looking at therapy differently back in 2025, and I tried to look at it in a similar way to sending a check-in text to a mate of mine, where when I talk to my mates, everything that we say in that conversation stays in the conversation. It's all private. So I tried to see therapy the same way, where yes, the therapist or psychologist, they are a stranger. I could try to rationalize by saying that they're paid, that's their job to listen to me, but also it's a chance for me to open up in a safe space. And if I find a good therapist, if I find a good psychologist, it's going to be a safe space. Nothing leaves the room. So adopting this perspective really removed a lot of the pressure. It removed a lot of the guilt and the shame, and it made therapy less and less dramatic. It made it less glamorous. It was just like going to someone I know and talking to them. That person just happens to be a professional. And I'll tell you, I've changed therapists 3 or 4 times. Maybe 4 or 5 times. I've had 4 or 5, maybe 6 therapists over the last 10 years. When I was first looking for one at 18 years old, I think I sieved through about 3 or 4. I guess I could include one of my school counselors in that. But it took me a little while to find the right therapist. And now I have a different therapist to the one I had before 2025. And that's the thing. I know that it is a little bit, it is quite dependable on the city that you live, the country that you live, how accessible things are. I'm extremely lucky that here in Sydney that we have a good healthcare system, and finding a good therapist that fits you is relatively easy. There's still some loopholes, but it's so simple for the most part. And whilst there's nothing certain about a therapy session, you're never going to always find a solution. I can tell you that almost every time after I walk out of a session, I feel a little bit lighter. I feel like so much more pressure has been lifted off my shoulders. I feel like I can breathe a little bit more. I feel a little bit more forgiving of myself. I feel like I have some renewed feeling to get on with the rest of the day. Now, often that feeling only lasts a couple of hours and maybe at best a day. But if I keep going and keep turning up and just showing up without any expectations, then perhaps one day after 20, 30, or 50 sessions, that feeling of being light, being a bit more free, forgiving, and a little bit of optimism will last a long, long time. Look, therapy is not easy, and you have to do work. You have to be willing to put in the work to firstly turn up to the session, but also the lessons and the advice that your therapist gives you. But a lot of people that I know who go to therapy regularly, every time they walk out of a session, they'll tell me that they feel so much better. And yes, that feeling is temporary, but things compound, and the more of a good thing that you do, eventually that starts to settle in. And the bad days, the dark times, they're never going to go away. But what therapy does is that it gives you the tools to be able to manage those thoughts and try to get through a bad day. And for me, that's what it's all about. It's not about trying to be happy and go lucky and be up bounding, jumping for joy again. It's about being able to get through those tough days and tough moments, and to try to be a bit more forgiving of myself whenever I make a mistake. So there we have it. Those are the 3 main changes that I made to my life in 2025 that helped me manage my mental health a lot better and help me survive and get through my depression. Of course, there were other things as well that I started doing a lot better, things like exercising regularly, just to get moving, a bit of meditation, not pushing and sprinting to the point that my body breaks down, being okay with just sitting still, watching TV, reading a book, just doing nothing and being calm. But these 3 things made a huge difference in my life, and I'm going to keep doing them in 2026. The one thing I will say is that the results, the outcomes, the benefits did not happen overnight. It took months before I started noticing them. And you can really only notice them upon reflection, I think. The thing about mental health, mental illness, trying to recover from these things and getting better is that it takes a long time. It takes a lot of hard work. There are going to be plenty of times where you just fall apart, you fall back, 1 step forward, 3 steps back. But if you have good people around you, good resources, and if you just remind yourself to just try to turn up and show up, then after a little while, it could be a few weeks, could be a few months, it could be a few years, things will start to change. And when you reflect like I am doing now, you might realize, I think you'll definitely realize that you have a lot more strength than you might initially think, and you got through all the tough moments in your life. And if you got through them then you can definitely get through them in the future. I know that this year and for many years to come, I'm still going to have some tough moments. I may fall back into that really dark place that I was at the end of 2024, start of 2025. But I now know that these tools that I have can help me get through those dark periods. More importantly, I also have resources that I can use, and there are people in my life who I love dearly and who care about me as well, and they're willing to be there and help me. So thank you so much for turning up to today's episode. I really appreciate you taking 30 minutes out of your day to listen to me talk. Hopefully you got something out of it. It gave you a bit of calm, reassurance, a bit of peace. Remember, I'm just 1 DM or email away if you just want to have a chat. In the meantime, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.